Hi everyone, Chris here from IELTSadvantage.com, and today we're going to look at the difference between passive and active vocabulary and the impact that this has on your IELTS scores and, most importantly, your IELTS preparation, which obviously links into your IELTS scores. So have you ever been writing or speaking and you get very frustrated because the vocabulary that was accessible to you when you were reading or listening, and you just can't get that vocabulary out onto the page or out of your mouth? So we received an email yesterday from one of our VIP students, and she said this exact thing. She said that when she's reading and listening, she can understand everything. She's getting regular band 8, band 9s on the reading test, but she found it really frustrating that when she was doing the writing test, she's getting, a band 6 for vocabulary on the writing test. She finds it very frustrating because she knows that the vocabulary is just on the tip of her tongue. She's able to, access it a little bit, but not able to actually use it in the test. And this is all about active and versus passive vocabulary and how our brains learn new words. And we're going to talk about that and give you some advice about how to improve your active vocabulary for writing and speaking. Okay, so passive versus active. All right, so let me first explain the difference. What do these actually mean? So your passive vocabulary are words that you understand but you can't yet use. So if you see them in a book or you hear them, you understand what they mean, but you can't use them when you're writing or you're speaking. So your active vocabulary, those are words that you can both understand and use. So you have no problem understanding them when you see them in a book or when you listen to them, and you also have no problem using them when you're speaking and when you're writing. You don't make any mistakes and you understand the meaning. You have no problem using those words. And there's a big difference between passive and active. The biggest difference is passive is always much bigger than your active vocabulary. You will always know far more words than you can use, and this is totally normal. Even native English speakers have a far smaller active vocabulary than their passive vocabulary. So that might sound strange to you. I was dealing with this student that sent me the email about it last night, and she said, well, do native English speakers not just know everything? Do they not just know every single word in the English language and they're able to use it? I was like, no, let me give you an example. So before I was a teacher, I was a lawyer. And lawyers use legal terms and legal words all the time. And when a client would come in to speak to me, I would use these legal terms and use these legal words, and they would fully understand what they meant. Well, most of them, hopefully, most of the time. But that doesn't mean that they would be able to take those words that they understood and actually use them properly in a conversation or use them in a letter or an email, for example. And the thing to remember is this is totally normal. It doesn't matter if your passive vocabulary is much bigger than your active vocabulary. That's not a bad thing. That's actually just a normal thing, and that's how our brains learn vocabulary and how our brains use vocabulary. So don't worry about that so much, but as an IELTS student, you should be trying to move words in your passive vocabulary to your active vocabulary and enlarging your active vocabulary, and that's going to help you. All right, so the third point, and this is important for you to understand your scores and why your reading scores might be much higher than your writing and your speaking scores. Many people think that it's just, that they just don't know how to write or they don't know how to speak. It's got a lot to do with your passive and active vocabulary. So when you are reading and listening, because you have a much bigger passive vocabulary, reading and listening are not, for most people, for the vast majority of people, are not as big of a problem on the IELTS test as speaking and writing. So if you look at most people's scores, most people will get, let's say an average student that I deal with will be getting, a 7 to an 8 in reading and listening, but they'll be getting 6.5 to 6 in speaking and writing in general. And a lot of that has to do with vocabulary. Vocabulary is 25% of your total mark, and it also, vocabulary, having a large active vocabulary just allows you far more freedom in the speaking test and the writing test. It's one of the things that will constrict your freedom on the speaking test, especially, is if you have limited vocabulary, you'll not be able to express yourself. You'll not be able to discuss all the different topics as well as freely as students who have a much wider active vocabulary. So if you are having problems with speaking and writing, one of the solutions, not the only solutions, but one of the main solutions will be improving, moving those passive words over to the active part here. But very importantly, passive always comes first, and then active follows passive. This is really important for how you learn vocabulary, and this is where many of you are going wrong. So many of you watching this video right now, you will have had a teacher, or you'll have saw it on a website, or your friend will have given you a list of vocabulary. And often these are called band 9 lists, or diamond words, or golden words, or something stupid like that. And what they basically tell you is, learn these words, insert them into your essay, insert them into your speaking test, and you'll get a high mark. Well, what you're basically doing is you are not putting those words, if you're just learning a list with, a list of words with translations or meanings, you're not putting them into your passive vocabulary. You're trying to, completely take this part out and put it directly into your active vocabulary, which doesn't work. You have to put it into your passive vocabulary first, understand what it means, be able to read, be able to listen to that word in context, and then understand what it means, and then, only then, will you be able to use that word when you're speaking or writing. Alright, so that's extremely important for you to understand. And it's also the reason that when any student asks me, how do I improve my vocabulary, the first place we start is them reading and listening. So think about reading and listening as the input. Alright, without the input, you're never going to have the output. Okay, so you need to have the input first in terms of, whoa, the light just went. It's a live video. So you need to have the input first in terms of the reading and the listening, and then you move from passive over to active, and that's how you learn vocabulary for speaking and writing. Not learning lists of words. They do not work. If they did work, I would give them to you, but they do not work. Alright, so the other thing, and this is probably very apparent already, passive, you're receiving it. Okay, so you're receiving that passive vocabulary in the form of reading and listening. Reading and listening are often called receptive skills. You are receiving the information and understanding it, okay? Whereas the active vocabulary, you're using it, you're producing the language. And there's a huge difference between receiving a language and producing a language. Again, this is another reason why people generally get much higher scores for reading and listening, because they're very comfortable and they've been receiving that information and understanding that information. And also think about how much time you spend reading and listening versus speaking and writing. Like, most people will spend reading and listening, 10, 50, 100 times longer in their lives reading and listening to stuff and understanding stuff rather than producing stuff, especially writing. Very few of you write regularly in English. And I mean, I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but if you are insisting that you want a band 7 in the writing test, but you just never write in English, that is a pretty unreasonable thing to say. Just think about it in terms of the amount of time you actually do it. Other thing with passive is it's far more comfortable than active. Active, using your active vocabulary, it's more uncomfortable. What do I mean by that? So if you are sitting on the bus listening to a podcast, It's a very comfortable situation for you, or reading a book in bed, very, very comfortable in terms of nobody is going to criticize you for not fully understanding what you hear or what you read. Speaking and writing, you're putting that out into the world. People are going to judge you on it, and that's why many people do not want to speak or write. So many people are uncomfortable with criticism and they don't want to make any mistakes. So lots of the students that I've worked with, some of the students were band 9 for reading, band 9 for listening, but band 6 for speaking and writing. And they were saying, how is this possible? After speaking to them for a few minutes, it was apparent that they just never spoke or never wrote anything because they were afraid of criticism. They were afraid of making mistakes. So it's far easier to improve your reading and listening over the years than it is for speaking and writing. What's the solution to that problem? The only way that you're going to improve is to get comfortable making mistakes. You have to embrace mistakes. Each mistake you make is an opportunity for you to improve. So you have to use the vocabulary in order to improve it, and you have to be comfortable making mistakes. So how can you move from passive to active? So again, you're never going to have, the same number of words that you can use that you understand. It's not about, equaling it out, but it's about moving as many of these words and phrases over here to your active vocabulary so you can use them. So here are a few ways that you can do this. Number one is learn the words in context. All right, so when you're reading and listening, learn new words by looking at the words around it, guessing what they mean, looking at words in real English when you're reading a book or listening to something, because that's where it starts. Your active starts here in the passive. So instead of learning a list of words, what you're doing is you're reading, you're listening every day, and you're noting down new words, and you're learning them naturally like that. That's the first step. The second step is, when you're reading and listening, make sure that you note down all the information you need to remember that word. So that could be synonyms, antonyms, collocations, example sentences, pronunciation. Again, making it easy to remember that word and how you use that word. Collocations, for example, grammar, they're going to help you understand how to use that word in a sentence. The third stage is review. Like repetition, reviewing all of these. If you can do it every day, do it every day. If it's every few days, do that. If it's every week, do that. That's why I suggest to my students to keep a book. It doesn't, any book with, nothing on the pages, plain paper, and add all your new vocabulary there. And that will mean that you can review it regularly. Or there's lots of apps on phones and stuff that you can use, but I think just a normal book is the best. So the next stage is you have to actually use those words in a sentence. All right, so when you are, for example, practicing writing task 2, if you were reading about the environment and you're learning new words about the environment, just for example, go and do a writing task 2 essay on the environment and try and use those, but be very comfortable with making mistakes and get feedback on your work and think about how you use those words. Did you use them correctly or not? If you used them incorrectly, what was wrong about them? Was it a pronunciation issue if it's in speaking? Is it a grammar issue, collocation issue, a meaning issue, a style issue? What is the problem? Then you're going to learn from that and improve. So that's basically it. That's how you can understand how passive and active vocabulary affect your whole preparation and your performance on the test. Very, very important, and not many students think or know about that. So if you do understand that, you're way ahead of most people. So we're going to take some questions now, and let me see how much time I have. About 15 minutes, or until I just get tired or annoyed. Hopefully not. Hopefully not the second one. Read. In questions like give your opinion, can we use in my opinion? Yes, sure. It's no problem. In general, you should avoid personal pronouns, but it's fine to use them. In general, try and avoid them. but it's fine to use them if it says what's your opinion, to say in my opinion, or I think, or I believe, or whatever it is. So, very good question, because it relates to what we've been talking about. I have many problems with task 1. Can you please suggest me a few common sentences I can use in every kind of chart? Okay, so there's so many things wrong with that statement, all right? So you're saying that you just want to memorize some common sentences, all right? There's no way that you're going to be able to actively use those common sentences properly. Second reason why there's a lot of things wrong with that, there are no common sentences, all right? You're going to have to analyze data for task 1, academic. So that data is going to influence what is in the sentence. There's no way that you can apply common sentences to subjective data that changes every single time. If it's task 1 general training, it's going to be on different topics every single time. So there's no way that you can do that. So that's an example of someone trying to cheat the exam or shortcut the exam, and that's the worst thing you can do. That might sound harsh, but I'm saying this for your own good, because if you try and do that, you'll fail every single time. What you have to do instead is actually learn English properly and learn what to do on the test properly, which takes a longer amount of time to do, but it means you're going to pass the test. So be very careful with that. Tiagi, can we use synonyms in the listening test? If the audio says wedding anniversary, what if I write marriage anniversary? No, just write what it says. In the listening test, if it's wrong, if it's not exactly the same as the answer, it's wrong. Why would you change it? So that doesn't make any sense. So that's an example of someone making the test way more difficult for themselves than it actually needs to be, and then complaining that they got a low score. It's much simpler just to hear what the recording, what it says, and then write that down. I don't know. That seems like a more logical thing to do than try and change it for no reason. Use synonyms in the writing test and the speaking test, but in the listening test, just write what you hear. Paramjit, although I mostly use passive sentences in writing, I got a 6 band. Okay, so your mistake is you think that using passive sentences are going to get you a high score. They're not. Passive sentences are related to grammar, okay? Grammar is only 25% of your total mark. This might sound silly, but it's a very common thing that students say to us. They say things like, oh, I used lots of passive sentences and I still got a band 6. Like, yeah. Number one, grammar is 25% of your total mark. Passive versus active sentences, that's a very, very, very small part of grammar. So, you know, I don't, there isn't a small, exact number of what passive versus active contributes to your total score, but it's tiny. The second thing is you shouldn't use all passive sentences in your writing. That's not how you write. Most of it is actually going to be active. So you do need to understand what you have to do in order to do well on this test. So yeah, you're talking about someone suggested me, yeah, find someone who knows what they're doing to teach you. Don't listen to someone who tells you stuff like that, because it doesn't, it's going to mess up your mark. I'm just trying to find a question that makes sense. There are a lot of questions that don't, so I'm just trying to make... Amir, is it okay to use a slang in the test? I wouldn't recommend using slang in the test unless you really know the language, because slang can be colloquial, it can be idiomatic, it's very, you know, high-level natural English. You might think because it's called slang that it's not high level. It is very, very, very advanced. Like swear words, for example, cursing, for example. You have to really know the language in order for you to use them effectively. Someone who can use bad language effectively is a very, very high level language learner, especially in English, because we have so many slang and colloquial terms. The point I'm trying to make is you are probably not capable of using slang effectively. So I wouldn't use it. But if you can use it effectively, do use it, because it shows that you're way above 99% of other IELTS students. But I wouldn't suggest it, because you're probably not going to be able to use it correctly. Radina, so you got a band 8 in speaking and a band 5 in reading. Okay, so if you're getting a band 8 in speaking, it means there's nothing wrong with your vocabulary or your grammar or your awareness of the language. But if you're getting a band 5 in reading, probably that's test strategy or test technique. Because as I said, there's nothing wrong with your English if you're getting a band 8 for speaking. You probably have problems with test technique and understanding the different questions, and having a strategy for all those different questions can really help you with that. So that's what I would suggest. Focus on test technique for you. Gary, how can we enhance our own active vocabulary? So that was what the whole video was about. So maybe you missed the beginning of it. So watch the replay. Damanpreet, good question. Sir, when will you give us complex language to give us benefit towards the overall IELTS score? Very good question. So basically what you're saying is, why don't I just give you a list of complex words and phrases and sentences, and then you can use those in your test? That doesn't work, all right? So you have to learn how to walk before you can run. The examiner is not judging you on just your ability to insert one word and maybe luckily it's correct. If you're using complex grammar and vocabulary, most of it is going to be incorrect, so you're lowering your score. But the examiner will also look at your ability to use basic grammar, basic sentences, basic words. If all of those are wrong, or most of those are wrong, it doesn't matter if you've slipped in one complex phrase or sentence, you're going to get a low score. So focus on the basics first. Learn how to do those first properly. I know that's not what you want to hear, but I'm not going to lie to you and give you, it would be easy for me to just give you a list of words and charge you $10 for it. I'd be a millionaire, but it wouldn't work. So why would you do that? I don't know. Good question. Although I read a lot, I still struggle to generate ideas in writing and speaking. I get feedback, but I still can't improve it. I would have to talk to you about that, but some common reasons. Number one, you could be overcomplicating everything. That's the most common thing that I see with idea generation. Students thinking that they need complex ideas or sophisticated ideas or advanced ideas. For writing and speaking, the simplest ideas are always the best. The simplest, most straightforward ideas, because they're obvious, they're ones that you can talk about, they're ones that you can develop. So if you simplify things and just keep it simple, that helps your idea generation. Also, you could be using brainstorming, which doesn't work at all. So avoid that. Again, brainstorming it's an overcomplication. You don't need to, draw a bubble in the middle of the page and then, do all those things. Just think, like, if it's a question that says, what are the problems and solutions? Just think, what's a problem? What's a solution? Think, do it in a very direct way like that, and that could help you. Those are the most common reasons. The other common reason is you just don't have the knowledge, but you said that you're reading and listening all the time, so that's probably not a problem. But I would say it's number one. You're overcomplicating everything without talking to you, but I'd really need to talk to you to find out why. Is it wrong to start the speaking topic with "I would like to talk about"? It depends what you're talking about. Like if they say "Where are you from?" and you say "I would like to talk about where I'm from blah blah blah," and that's totally unnatural. Speak to the examiner how you would speak to a normal person. Alright, don't think of it as this is a test, even though it is. In the speaking test, just speak to them like you would speak to a friend or a colleague or a teacher or someone like that. Hopefully you would speak to those people. Imagine speaking to your friend and said, "What did you do last night?" And you started off the sentence with, "I would like to start by telling you about what I did last night." Like, you wouldn't do that, So why would you do it in the IELTS test? Okay. Alright guys, so a few more minutes, going to try and answer questions quickly. Can we use idioms or phrasal verbs? In the speaking test, yes. In the writing test, no. In the speaking test, only use them if you know how to use them properly. To express opinion, this essay agrees that is okay, or in my opinion, either are fine. Can we use idioms in task 2? No. If you have a teacher who tells you to use idioms in task 2, run very far away from them because they don't know what they're doing. Sir, I have pauses in the speaking cue card topic. How to overcome this? Plan your answer and have a strategy and know what you're doing. Also, don't rely solely on the bullet points. You can talk about other things related to that topic. Can we write conclusion, writing task 2, to conclude and conclusion? Yes, you can. But all these questions, like, can we put to conclude or in conclusion? Like, can we put in my opinion or this essay agrees? You're ignoring the most important things, which is understanding the question, generating specific relevant ideas, developing those ideas, using accurate grammar, using accurate vocabulary. You're ignoring all the important things by focusing on things that don't really matter. If you write the perfect essay, it's not like the examiner is going to get to the last sentence and be like, "Oh, they used to conclude instead of in conclusion. I thought this person was a band 9, let's give them a 6 instead." Doesn't work like that. Focus on the things that really matter and ignore all the little things that don't matter. But you probably need someone to help you figuring out what those are. So find someone reliable to help you with that. I think that brainstorming is a kind of critical thinking. No, it's not. It's just a way of generating lots and lots and lots and lots of ideas, which is not what you want to be doing in the test. In the test, you want to be generating specific, relevant ideas very quickly. Brainstorming does the absolute opposite of that. It generates irrelevant ideas very slowly. There you go. I'll end with that. Thank you very much, guys. Hope you have a great weekend. Good luck to anybody doing the test tomorrow, and to anybody else, if you need help, go to IELTSadvantage.com. If you really need my help and you want help with your preparation, go to chris@IELTSadvantage.com. And if you've liked this video, please give it a like. If you want future videos, please give it a subscribe. And I'll be back on Monday. Have a great weekend, guys. Thank you very much.